A vast fortune simply vanished into thin air. This is the 700-year-old mystery of the Knights Templars' treasure. They were not just knights but warrior monks, international bankers, and the most powerful financial entity of the Middle Ages. Their sudden and brutal downfall left behind one glaring question: where did all their legendary wealth go? By the end of this journey, you will understand the full scope of the hunt, from the historical facts to the wildest global theories. We will examine secret fleets, cursed gold, and stone-coded maps across continents. The void they left was filled with whispers of hidden chests, sacred relics, and forbidden knowledge. This is an adventure through history where every clue leads to another enigma. What do you believe is the most compelling kind of treasure? Their story begins not with gold but with a solemn vow. In the year 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Payens and 8 companions presented themselves to the King of Jerusalem. They were not there to conquer but to serve. They took monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but with a singular, revolutionary purpose. They would become warriors for God, dedicated solely to protecting the stream of Christian pilgrims traveling the dangerous roads to the Holy City. The king granted them a headquarters on the most sacred and contested ground imaginable, the Temple Mount. From this powerful symbol, they took their name, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. We know them as the Knights Templar. This humble band of 9 ignited a spiritual and military phenomenon. Their unique identity as warrior monks, answering directly to the Pope and no earthly king, set them apart. Donations poured in from devout nobles across Europe, eager to support the holy cause. Lands, estates, and entire villages were gifted to the order, but their true genius lay in innovation. They recognized a practical problem. Pilgrims traveling from England or France to Jerusalem faced the constant threat of robbery. Carrying a fortune in coin across thousands of miles was an invitation for disaster. So the Templars created a revolutionary system. A pilgrim could deposit his funds at a Templar preceptory or commandery in London. In return, he received a coded letter of credit. This was a piece of parchment that, when presented at the Templar fortress in Jerusalem, would allow him to withdraw the equivalent value in local currency. It was the world's first traveler's check, and it was utterly secure. The Templars charged a fee for this service, and their reputation for incorruptibility made them the trusted bankers for the powerful. Kings, including the King of France, used the Templar network to store their royal treasuries and to transfer vast sums across continents without moving a single physical coin. Their network grew into a medieval multinational. At their peak, they managed a vast portfolio of nearly 9,000 estates, from sprawling farms and vineyards to mills and ports. These preceptories were not just monasteries or forts, they were economic powerhouses generating continuous revenue. They became the de facto treasury for European nobility, a secure deposit box for crowns, jewels, and historical artifacts. This is the crucial foundation of the treasure myth. It was not a single chest of gold in a cave. It was a flowing, continent-spanning river of wealth, administered with military precision and absolute secrecy. Their financial power became so immense that it rivaled, and in some way surpassed, the kingdoms they served. They built the framework for modern finance, and in doing so, they built a legend. The disappearance of such a system would not be a simple theft. It would be an economic vanishing act of epic proportions. But such immense power casts a long and dangerous shadow. For King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, that shadow had become intolerable. By the early 1300s, he was drowning in debt, much of it owed to the very bankers he could not control, the Knights Templar. He had tried to join the order, to place himself at its head, and was firmly rejected. Their wealth was within his borders, their independence a direct challenge to his authority. So Philip devised a plan of breathtaking audacity and treachery. He would not ask for the treasure, he would seize it and destroy the Templars in the process. The date he chose would forever stain the calendar. It was dawn on Friday, October 13th, 1307. Under a cloak of absolute secrecy, royal officials and soldiers across France moved simultaneously. They carried sealed orders, opened only at the last moment, authorizing the arrest of every Templar in the kingdom. The targets were the order's preceptories, those fortified banks and monasteries. The goal was to catch the knights unaware before they could hide or move their assets. In Paris, at the mighty Templar fortress known as the Temple, the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, was taken from his bed. He was an old man, a veteran leader who had spent decades in service. He and hundreds of his brothers were thrown into damp, dark cells. The charges read against them were designed to shock and horrify medieval society. Heresy, denying Christ, spitting on the cross, engaging in obscene secret rituals, and most tantalizingly, worshipping a mysterious idol known as Baphomet. These accusations provided the moral cover for a blatant financial raid. The shockwave from that Friday the 13th reverberated across Europe. A military and financial pillar of Christendom had been shattered in a single morning. Kings and popes were stunned, but for Philip's agents, the real shock came when they broke into the Templar treasuries. The vaults in Paris, the heart of their financial empire, were found to be nearly empty. Where were the chests of gold coin, the stacks of silver ingots, the jeweled reliquaries and royal crowns held in trust? The sheer scale of wealth everyone knew the Templars possessed was simply gone. This immediate, glaring absence is the spark that ignited a 700-year mystery. If the king's men, acting with perfect surprise, found nothing, then the treasure must have been moved before the arrest. But how did they know, and where did it all go? The void left in those vaults was far more powerful than any gold. It was the void of a question, a silent challenge that has echoed through the centuries. The silence of those empty vaults spoke louder than any confession. King Philip's agents, expecting to fill the royal coffers with a legendary fortune, were met with a profound and embarrassing reality. Inside the Paris Temple, the very epicenter of Templar financial power, they reportedly found only modest sums of coin, some silver plate, and a collection of documents. The mountains of gold, the stored treasures of kings, the accumulated capital of 2 centuries, it had all evaporated. This was not a case of a few chests being hidden, it was a systemic evacuation. The immediate conclusion was as obvious as it was unsettling. Someone had warned them. The arrests, planned with such meticulous secrecy, had somehow been compromised. The question of who could have leaked the order has fueled endless speculation. Was it a sympathetic noble within the king's inner circle, a bribed official, or perhaps the Templars' own sophisticated intelligence network, built to track money across continents, finally tracked the threat coming from their own royal debtor? The forewarning theory is compelling because it explains the sheer scale of the disappearance. Moving such a vast treasury would have required time, coordination, and secure routes, things impossible to arrange in a single night. Yet, if they were warned, why did the leadership, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay, remain in Paris to be captured? This paradox deepens the mystery. Perhaps only a select inner circle was entrusted with the evacuation, while the majority of the order, including its figurehead, were deliberately left as a sacrifice to buy time. The emptiness in France was mirrored elsewhere, though with less drama. In England, King Edward II eventually followed Philip's lead and arrested the Templars. But the inventories of seized property from English commanderies tell a similar, quieter story. They list lands, buildings, livestock, and grain stores, the fixed assets of a wealthy agricultural enterprise. But the liquid wealth, the portable treasure, was conspicuously absent. It seems the warning or the order's own contingency plans had a European reach. So we are left with the established core of the mystery, clean and undeniable. If the treasure was not in their vaults on the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, then it was already somewhere else. The hunt does not begin in a ransacked treasury. It begins in the days and weeks before the arrests, on the roads and sea lanes leading away from Templar strongholds, following a shadowy trail of decisions made by men who knew their world was about to end. Out of that empty silence grew a legend. With no official record of the treasure's fate, the human mind, especially one fueled by the memory of unimaginable wealth, began to construct its own answers. The vacuum of facts was filled with the irresistible fuel of speculation. Almost immediately, whispers began to circulate, stories passed in taverns and royal courts alike. The most persistent and romantic of these rumors spoke of a secret Templar fleet. The order was known to have owned ships, used for transporting troops, supplies, and presumably revenue between Europe and the Holy Land. The port of La Rochelle on France's Atlantic coast was a key Templar holding. The legend says that in the days or weeks before the fateful arrests, a convoy of ships, their sails marked with the distinctive red cross, slipped out of that harbor under cover of darkness. Their holds were not filled with grain or soldiers, but with heavy, sealed chests containing the bulk of the Templar treasury. This image of ghostly ships vanishing into the misty Atlantic with a king's ransom aboard is powerful and enduring. It transforms the treasure from an abstract financial system into something tangible and huntable, chests of gold coin, silver bullion, and jeweled church plate. This idea of physical, buried wealth is what truly ignited the treasure-hunting fever that would last for centuries. If the gold was on those ships, then it had to go somewhere. Early legends, even in the decades following the Order's dissolution, began pointing fingers across the map. Some said the fleet sailed north, finding refuge in Scotland, where the king had refused to persecute the Templars, offering them sanctuary in a remote and rugged land. Others whispered the ships turned south to Portugal, where the Order simply changed its name and continued under royal protection, perhaps taking their core wealth with them. And even in an age before Columbus, there were fantastical murmurs of lands across the Western Ocean, suggesting the Templars had secret knowledge of a new world where their treasure could be hidden beyond the reach of any European king. Each rumor planted a seed. Every suggested destination became a potential X on a map, waiting for someone with a shovel and a dream to start digging. The treasure was no longer just missing money. It was a ghost haunting coastlines and forests across the continent, daring anyone to find it. But the whispers of gold and silver were only part of the story. To understand the full power of the Templar legend, we must consider a different kind of treasure, one that holds value not in weight but in faith. For nearly 2 centuries, the Knights Templar were the guardians of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the very ground believed to be the site of Solomon's temple. Legends sprang from this profound fact. What if, during their extensive excavations and construction of their headquarters, they found something, not gold, but objects of unimaginable spiritual power, relics lost since biblical times? This theory suggests the Templars' true, secret wealth was not in their vaults but in their chapel. The most famous candidate is, of course, the Holy Grail, the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper. Some stories propose the Grail was not a cup at all, but a secret lineage or knowledge which the Templars were sworn to protect. Another colossal legend points to the Ark of the Covenant, the gilded chest containing the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, said to have vanished centuries before. Could the warrior monks have discovered it beneath the ruins of the temple? Other revered relics enter the speculation, fragments of the true cross on which Jesus was crucified, or even the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth bearing a mysterious image of a man. The Templars' documented fascination with sacred head reliquaries adds a strange layer to this. During their trials, some knights under torture confessed to worshipping a mysterious carved head called Baphomet. While likely a forced fabrication, this accusation has been endlessly reinterpreted. Was Baphomet a slanderous demon or a distorted memory of an actual relic they venerated? Perhaps it was a claimed head of John the Baptist or a symbolic representation of divine wisdom. This shift from financial to spiritual treasure transforms the entire mystery. It is no longer a question of who dug up a chest, but of who inherited a sacred trust. If the Templars possessed such items, their sudden downfall makes their evacuation plans even more urgent. You would not hide the Grail in a royal treasury. You would secrete it away with utmost care, entrusting it to a hidden lineage of guardians. This layer of supernatural intrigue is why the Templar treasure hunt has never faded. It offers two parallel quests. One is for historians and archaeologists following paper trails and land deeds. The other is for seekers of the sublime, chasing a ghost of faith that promises not riches but a revelation. The treasure in this light becomes a key, one that might unlock not a vault but a forgotten chapter of sacred history. The trial of the Templars was never a search for truth but a theater of power. Grand Master Jacques de Molay and his senior leaders endured years of imprisonment and brutal torture, leading to the public confessions King Philip needed. Yet behind this public spectacle, a quieter, more revealing drama was unfolding. Pope Clement V, the head of the Church, was in an impossible position. He was a weak pope residing in France, effectively under the thumb of the powerful and ruthless King Philip. While publicly he had to allow the trials to proceed, evidence suggests he was deeply conflicted about the destruction of a holy order that answered directly to the papacy. For centuries, the full story of his private actions remained locked away, a matter of historical speculation. Then, in the year 2001, a scholar named Barbara Frail made a stunning discovery in the Vatican secret archives. She found a long misplaced document known as the Chinon Parchment. Dated August 13, 1308, it recorded the results of a secret papal inquiry conducted not by French torturers, but by 3 cardinals sent by Clement himself. In these private hearings, Jacques de Molay and the other Templar leaders recounted their forced confessions. They swore their innocence of heresy and their fidelity to the Catholic faith. And critically, the parchment shows that Pope Clement V, acting on this inquiry, granted the leaders absolution and restored them to communion with the Church. This was a secret pardon, a hidden act of mercy and belief in their innocence, completely at odds with the public narrative being crafted by the French crown. The discovery of this parchment is a seismic event for the mystery. It provides modern, documentary proof that the highest religious authority of the time did not believe the Templars were heretics. The charges of devil worship and spitting on the cross were, in the Pope's own secret judgment, fabrications. This confirmation shifts the entire foundation of the persecution from a religious crusade to a blatant financial and political robbery. If the Pope knew they were innocent yet ultimately allowed the order to be dissolved under immense royal pressure, it raises a profound and disturbing question. Was the papal throne itself complicit in a cover-up? Clement's eventual public condemnation of the order in 1312, which handed over their assets to the Hospitallers, though much was already seized by kings, can be seen as a tragic capitulation to save his own office from ruin. This modern revelation makes the disappearance of the treasure seem even more deliberate and justified. If the knights knew the charges were a lie and that even the Pope could not save them, then spiriting their wealth away was not an act of greed, but one of survival and perhaps defiance. It transforms the treasure hunt from a simple chase for gold into a search for the last act of a condemned order, an act taken precisely because they knew the world's justice had been corrupted. The Chinon Parchment does not tell us where the treasure went, but it powerfully tells us why the Templars would have moved heaven and earth to ensure King Philip never laid a hand on it. On a cold March afternoon in 1314, the final act of the Templar tragedy was staged on a small island in the River Seine. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, an old man broken by 7 years of imprisonment and torture, was led out to a platform built of firewood. He had one last chance to publicly confess to the fabricated crimes and beg for mercy. Instead, in a moment of defiant clarity, he did the unthinkable. He recanted his forced confession, proclaiming the innocence of the order and himself before the gathered crowd. Then, as the flames were lit, he raised his voice one final time. He did not plead, he pronounced a curse. He summoned Pope Clement V and King Philip IV to appear with him before the judgment seat of God within the year. The fire consumed him, but his words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy. What happened next sealed this moment into legend. Pope Clement V, who had signed the order's final dissolution, died of a sudden illness just 1 month later. King Philip IV, the architect of the entire persecution, died in a hunting accident before the year was out. The timeline was uncanny, the symmetry perfect. To a medieval world that believed deeply in divine justice and the power of a dying man's last words, this was not coincidence. It was vindication. The Grand Master's curse had come true. This story, whether historical fact or powerful folklore, did more than just haunt the memories of the king and pope. It wrapped the entire Templar legacy, and by extension their missing treasure, in an aura of supernatural consequence. The message was clear. The wealth was not merely hidden, it was protected. It was a sacred trust, and to seek it with greed or malice would invite a terrible reckoning. This idea of a cursed treasure is a narrative force that has propelled the mystery for centuries. It transforms a historical hunt into a moral parable. In countless stories, books, and films, the Templar treasure is not just difficult to find, it is dangerous to possess. Those who pursue it for selfish gain meet with misfortune, accidents, or mysterious ends. This curse acts as a narrative guardian, ensuring the treasure only reveals itself to someone pure of heart or worthy of its secret. It answers a deep human need for poetic justice. The Templars were betrayed and murdered for their wealth, so that wealth itself must carry the stain of that betrayal, punishing any who repeat the sin. This layer of doom makes the treasure hunt infinitely more compelling. It is no longer a simple puzzle, but a test of character. Are you seeking knowledge or gold? Are you a rightful heir or another thief in the night? The curse of Jacques de Molay, whether literally believed or felt as a thematic shadow, ensures that the mystery of the Knights Templar is never just about where X marks the spot. It is about why some secrets are meant to stay buried and what price we are willing to pay to bring them into the light. The curse may have sealed their fate, but their story was far from over. While the order was officially dissolved across Europe, one kingdom remained a glaring exception. Scotland, in the early 1300s, was a land in open rebellion. Its king, Robert the Bruce, had been excommunicated by the Pope for his defiance against English rule. This papal censure created a fascinating legal loophole. When the Pope's order to suppress the Templars arrived, King Robert, already outside the Church's good graces, had little incentive to enforce it. For fugitive knights fleeing the purge in France and England, the wild, rugged highlands of Scotland presented a perfect, and perhaps the only, safe harbor. This is not just speculation, it is a compelling historical possibility. We know that Templar properties in England were seized, but the records of arrests are sparse. It is entirely plausible that knights, warned of the coming storm, could have sailed north, disappearing into the chaos of the Scottish Wars of Independence. Their arrival would have been a secret welcomed by a king desperately in need of seasoned warriors. And then we come to a pivotal moment, the Battle of Bannockburn in June of 1314. This was the climactic showdown where Robert the Bruce's outnumbered army faced the full might of England's King Edward II. According to some chronicles and a powerful later legend, the tide of battle turned at a critical juncture. As the Scottish lines wavered, a fresh, unknown force appeared on the horizon. This was not a band of Highlanders, but a disciplined unit of mounted knights who charged into the English flank and helped secure a stunning victory for Scotland. Who were these mysterious reinforcements? The official records are silent, but the timing is hauntingly precise. The Templar Order had been crushed just months before. Its surviving members were scattered, hunted, and highly trained. The idea that a contingent of these master military men, finding refuge with Bruce, fought at Bannockburn is a story that fits the gap in the historical record like a lost puzzle piece. It gives the Templars a noble second act, fighting not for the Holy Land, but for a new homeland that offered them sanctuary. This Scottish connection does more than provide an escape route. It plants the seed for the treasure's most famous alleged resting place. If the knights and their wealth came to Scotland, where did it end up? The answer for many lies in stone. Decades after Bannockburn, a noble family with long-rumored ties to the Templars, the Sinclairs, began constructing a chapel in the village of Rosslyn. Rosslyn Chapel, built in the mid-1500s, is a masterpiece of carved enigma. Its interior is a forest of stone, covered in intricate symbols that seem to tell a story no one can fully decipher. There are carvings of plants like maize and aloe vera, species unknown in Europe before Columbus sailed, hinting at pre-Columbian knowledge. Most strikingly, there is the famous apprentice pillar, a twisting, ornate column shrouded in its own legend of murder and secret craftsmanship. For treasure hunters, Rosslyn is the ultimate symbol. The theory suggests the chapel was not just a place of worship, but a purpose-built reliquary. Could its elaborate underground crypts or even the pillars themselves conceal the Templar treasure? Perhaps it is not gold, but sacred relics or documents that were sealed away by the Sinclair family, the new guardians of the old order's legacy. The Scottish theory offers a complete narrative arc from sanctuary to battle to a final, stone-coated hiding place. It turns the treasure hunt into a pilgrimage, leading to a silent chapel where every carved face seems to hold a secret just out of reach. Rosslyn Chapel stands as a silent sentinel of stone, its every surface whispering a riddle. Built over 40 years by the Sinclair family, this 15th century chapel is less a conventional church and more a three-dimensional book carved from rock. To step inside is to enter a world of bewildering symbolism. The ceiling is a celestial tapestry of stars, flowers, and angelic faces. Strange, leafy faces known as green men peer from the arches, ancient pagan symbols of rebirth woven into Christian architecture. But the most shocking carvings are botanical. There, clear as day, are stone renditions of maize or corn and aloe vera. The problem is historical. Maize is native to the Americas. Columbus would not reach the New World until 1492, yet here it is, carved in a Scottish chapel whose construction began in 1456. This anachronism is the cornerstone of a radical theory. Did the Sinclairs, with their rumored Templar ties, possess secret geographical knowledge passed down from the Knights? Could this indicate that Templar ships did not just flee to Scotland, but sailed much farther west, returning with news of a distant continent long before the official age of exploration? The carvings are not mere decoration, proponents argue. They are a record, a stone-coded logbook of a journey the history books forgot. The architectural layout deepens the mystery. Many researchers note that the ground plan of Rosslyn Chapel bears a striking resemblance to the biblical descriptions of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. This is not a casual homage. The Templars took their name from that very temple, having made their headquarters on its ruins. To rebuild its sacred geometry in the Scottish lowlands would be an act of profound symbolic continuity. It suggests the chapel was designed as a new ark, a permanent and secure repository for something precious the Templars saved. This idea transforms the building from a place of worship into a potential treasure map where the treasure itself might be knowledge. The precise angles, the specific number of pillars, the alignment of certain carvings, all could be part of a grand architectural cipher, waiting for someone with the right key to decode its directions. At the heart of this stone puzzle stands the masterpiece known as the Apprentice Pillar. Legend says the master mason went abroad to see the original pillar it was to be modeled on. During his absence, his young apprentice, inspired by a divine vision, designed and carved the magnificent spiraling column himself. Upon returning, the master mason was so consumed by jealous rage at its beauty that he struck and killed the apprentice with a mallet. The story is a parable of artistry and tragedy, but for treasure seekers, the pillar is far more. Its intricate, vine-like spirals are said to represent the tree of life, and some believe its core is hollow, perhaps containing a sacred scroll or relic placed there centuries ago. The very dust around its base has been analyzed, with some claiming to detect traces of maize pollen and New World plants, as if the pillar itself is a botanical time capsule. But the most tantalizing target lies beneath the stones. For generations, stories have persisted of a sealed crypt or vault deep below the chapel floor. In the 1980s, limited archaeological scans hinted at possible voids beneath the structure. The theory posits that the true treasure, whether it is gold, sacred relics, or ancient manuscripts, was never in the chapel itself, but hidden in a chamber below, with the carvings above serving as both a memorial and a guide. Modern searches have been constrained by the chapel's status as a protected historic site, leaving the question unanswered. Is Rosslyn Chapel the final resting place of the Templar legacy, or is it a magnificent red herring, a beautiful distraction built to honor a secret that was moved elsewhere long ago? The stone remains silent, holding its secret in plain sight, a permanent invitation to look closer and wonder what lies just beyond reach. While Scotland offered sanctuary in the shadows, Portugal provided a path of astonishing openness. King Diniz I of Portugal saw the papal order to disband the Templars not as a command, but as an opportunity. He was a pragmatic ruler who valued the knights' military prowess, their sophisticated administrative skills, and crucially, their vast network of lands and wealth within his borders. So in the year 1319, he simply refused to destroy them. Instead, he performed a brilliant act of political rebranding. With the Pope's eventual reluctant blessing, King Diniz officially dissolved the Templars in Portugal and immediately founded a new military order in their place, the Order of Christ. The membership, the properties, the entire infrastructure, it was all seamlessly transferred. The knights changed their cloaks, swapping the famous Red Cross for a new, similar emblem. But their core identity and, most importantly, their accumulated treasure remained intact and under royal control. This was not a hidden survival, but an official continuation. The Portuguese branch of the Templars never truly vanished, they evolved. This fact transforms one of the most persistent treasure theories. Perhaps the fabled wealth was not buried in a single, secret location. Maybe it was never hidden at all. Instead, it was funneled directly into the royal treasury and the coffers of this new Order of Christ, where it became the seed capital for one of history's greatest adventures. A century later, the Grand Master of the Order of Christ was none other than Prince Henry, known to history as Henry the Navigator. His school of navigation at Sagres, his patronage of shipbuilders, cartographers, and daring captains, was funded in large part by the immense resources of the order. Those carracks and caravels that began pushing down the African coast, mapping new routes and seeking a path to the Indies, were essentially Templar ships sailing under a new flag. This leads to a breathtaking proposition. If the Templars, through their Portuguese successors, financed the dawn of the Age of Discovery, what else did they contribute? The Knights were renowned for their secrecy and their access to knowledge from the East, from their time in Jerusalem and Constantinople. Could they have possessed ancient nautical charts or geographical secrets lost to mainstream Europe? The theory suggests that Prince Henry's navigators were not just exploring into the unknown, they were following clues. The mysterious carvings of New World plants in Rosslyn Chapel find a potential explanation here. What if Portuguese ships of the Order of Christ, using Templar wealth and perhaps Templar maps, reached the shores of the Americas decades before Columbus set sail. There are intriguing, though hotly debated, pieces of evidence. The enigmatic Cantino planisphere, an early 16th century Portuguese world map, shows a remarkably accurate coastline of Brazil years before its official discovery. The Padrão Real, the master map kept in Lisbon, was a state secret compiled from the reports of returning captains. Could some of those reports have been far older? This version of the treasure hunt is not about digging for chests. It is about tracing the flow of capital and influence across oceans. The treasure in this light becomes an engine. It funded voyages that changed the map of the world. It built empires. The Knights' legacy, their true hidden fortune, may not be a pile of gold in a crypt, but the very shape of the modern globe, carved by the prows of ships they paid for. This idea offers a powerful and poetic resolution. The Templars' wealth did not vanish into a hole in the ground. It was invested into the future, launching humanity into a new age of exploration, and possibly carrying their symbols and secrets to a new world waiting to be found. Across the Atlantic, a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia tells a story of its own buried secrets. Oak Island, a seemingly ordinary patch of forest and swamp, has consumed fortunes and lives for over 200 years in a single-minded quest. The obsession centers on a strange shaft discovered in the late 1700s by local teenagers. They found a circular depression in the ground, and above it, an old tree limb with a cut block and tackle, as if something heavy had been lowered there long ago. As they dug, they hit a layer of flagstones not native to the island. Then, at intervals of 10 feet, they encountered platforms of solid oak logs. This was no natural formation. It was a constructed shaft descending deep into the earth, and it became known as the Money Pit. The deeper treasure hunters went, the more bizarre and dangerous it became. The shaft seemed engineered to flood. Tunnels from the nearby ocean would inundate the pit with salt water, foiling every attempt to reach the bottom. It was a masterpiece of defensive engineering designed to protect its contents at all costs. The sheer complexity of the work, with its precise log platforms and clever hydraulic traps, pointed to builders of extraordinary skill and resources. This is where the Templar theory makes its bold Atlantic leap. Could the Money Pit be the work of those same fleeing knights, using their vast wealth and renowned engineering knowledge to create a permanent, impregnable vault in the New World? Proponents argue that only an organization with the Templars' military engineering experience, gained from building castles across Europe and the Holy Land, could have constructed such a sophisticated underground stronghold. The timeline they suggest fits. After the Purge, a contingent of knights with the bulk of the portable treasury could have sailed west, using navigational knowledge from their Portuguese successors, to a remote location far from the reach of any European king. The island itself, with its natural swamp and bedrock, provided the perfect geology for their flood trap. Over the decades, tantalizing if contested, clues have been pulled from the mud and water. A stone tablet was reportedly found at a depth of 90 feet, inscribed with a cryptic cipher of symbols. Though the original stone was lost, a later transcription was said to read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. Even more compelling were fragments of parchment brought up by a drill bit, suggesting documents or maps were stored down there. Perhaps the most peculiar find was coconut fiber discovered in the flood tunnels. Coconut fiber, or coir, was used as ship caulking in the 18th century, but its presence deep in a pit on a Canadian island hinted at maritime activity from tropical latitudes long before common trade routes existed there. To believers, each piece is a thread in the tapestry. The stone markings resemble Templar or Masonic symbols. The parchment could be a sacred text or a financial record. The coconut fiber suggests old-world ships arriving from southern ports. Together, they paint a picture of a deliberate, secretive deposit made by someone who intended to come back. Yet, for all the speculation, Oak Island remains a locked box. The very engineering that makes it a candidate for a Templar vault has defeated every attempt to solve it. Modern excavations have found traces of human activity, bits of metal, and wood dating to before European colonization, but the central chamber, if it exists, remains flooded and elusive. The island has become a modern-day analogy for the entire Templar mystery. It represents the frustrating, alluring possibility that the treasure is not a myth, but a physical puzzle waiting under our feet, guarded by the ingenious minds of the past. It asks us whether we are witnessing an elaborate historical accident or the silent, enduring victory of the Templars' final safeguard. Yet the most seductive modern chapter of the hunt unfolded not on a windswept island, but in a sleepy French village nestled in the foothills of the Pyrenees. Rosslyn Chapel appears as a postcard of rural tranquility, a cluster of stone houses overlooking green valleys. But in the late 1800s, this quiet parish became the stage for a mystery that would eclipse even the wildest Templar tales and redefine treasure hunting for the 20th century. It began with a priest named Béranger Saunière. Arriving in 1885, Saunière was a man of modest means, assigned to a crumbling church and a poor congregation. For years, his life followed the predictable, frugal path of a country curate. Then, something extraordinary happened. In the 1890s, Saunière began spending money, and he spent it like a man who had discovered a secret river of gold. He embarked on a lavish, bewildering restoration of his dilapidated church, dedicated to Mary Magdalene. He commissioned strange, ornate statues and commissioned a bas-relief of a demon guarding the holy water stoup, an unsettling choice for a place of worship. He built a grand library tower he called the Tour Magdala, and a luxurious villa with beautiful gardens, which he named Villa Bethania. The scale of his expenditures was staggering, equivalent to millions in today's currency. The source of this sudden wealth was, and remains, the core of the enigma. Officially, he claimed the money came from donations for masses, he said, for wealthy patrons. But the numbers never added up. The sheer volume of mass stipends he recorded was logistically impossible for one priest to perform, suggesting a fabricated cover story. The local rumor, which quickly took root, was far more dramatic. During his church renovations, Saunière had discovered something hidden within an ancient Visigoth pillar or beneath the flagstones of the altar. Perhaps it was a chest of Templar gold, secreted away centuries before when the order held lands in the region. Or, more tantalizingly, perhaps it was not gold at all, but a sheaf of ancient parchments, documents containing a secret so explosive it was worth a fortune to the right people. This is where the story detonated into the modern consciousness. In the 1970s and 80s, a series of books, most famously Holy Blood, Holy Grail, wove the priest's mystery into a grand and controversial tapestry. They proposed that Saunière's documents proved the Knights Templar had themselves discovered a far older secret during their time in Jerusalem. Not the location of Solomon's gold, but proof that Jesus Christ survived the crucifixion, married Mary Magdalene, and founded a bloodline that continued through European royalty. In this version, the Templar treasure was not metal or relic, but genealogical knowledge, and they were the militant guardians of this holy lineage. Saunière, the theory went, had found their hidden proof and used it to extract blackmail money from the Vatican or from secret societies wishing to keep the truth buried. While rigorously debunked by historians and based on forged documents, the power of this narrative is undeniable. It fused the Templar mystery with a biblical conspiracy, creating a modern mythology that felt both ancient and urgently relevant. Rosslyn Chapel demonstrates how the vacuum left by the missing Templar wealth acts as a powerful cultural magnet. It attracts other mysteries, other historical fragments, and weaves them into new and ever more elaborate legends. The village itself, with its odd church decorations and the priest's enigmatic purchases, became a physical puzzle box for thousands of pilgrims and amateur sleuths. They scoured the landscape for hidden codes in the architecture, alignments with mountain peaks, and cryptic messages in Saunier's personal effects. The real treasure of Rosslyn Chapel, therefore, may not be gold or parchment. It is the undeniable proof of our enduring need for a secret history, a hidden story behind the official record. It shows how the Knights Templar, as symbols of lost power and forbidden knowledge, can serve as the keystone for entire alternative worlds of belief. Even when the central claim is disproven, the allure persists because the original question from 1307 remains unanswered. Where did it all go? That silence is a canvas, and we keep painting it with our deepest mysteries. Perhaps the greatest trick the Templars ever pulled was making the world believe in a mountain of gold. What if the legendary treasure was never a physical hoard to begin with? To understand this, we must look past the chests and ships and see the true engine of their power, a revolutionary invention that changed the world. Their real treasure was not hidden in a cave, it was operating in plain sight. It was their financial system, a sophisticated network of credit and trust that functioned as the prototype for modern international banking. Think of it this way: today, your wealth is not a pile of cash in your basement. It is a number in a digital account, a representation of value based on promises and agreements. The Templars pioneered this very concept on a continental scale 700 years ago. A pilgrim's letter of credit was not gold, but it was as good as gold anywhere from London to Jerusalem because the order's reputation guaranteed it. Their immense wealth was not primarily stored as coins in a vault. It was locked in the value of their 9,000 estates, farms, vineyards, and mills. It was in the future income those properties would generate. It was in the interest owed on massive loans to kings and nobles. And most importantly, it was in the intangible but priceless asset of trust. When King Philip moved against them, he was not just after gold, he was attempting to seize this entire functioning economic machine. And from a certain historical perspective, he and others largely succeeded. The lands, the buildings, the tangible assets were systematically confiscated by the French crown and later transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. The lost treasure, then, might be something far more subtle and human. It could be the gap between perception and reality. For centuries, people had whispered about the Templars' bottomless wealth. Their financial secrecy fed legends of infinite gold. So when the vaults were found unexpectedly empty, the imagination filled that void with fantasy. The discrepancy between their staggering perceived paper wealth and the comparatively modest tangible assets recovered by the kings was not evidence of a hidden treasure, but proof of a powerful myth in the making. Their wealth was always more potential than actual, more credit than coin. This perspective does not rob the mystery of its power, it reframes it. The true treasure they guarded was the system itself, a system of moving value without moving metal, of creating trust across vast distances. That system could not be buried or sailed away. It was dismantled, its parts redistributed, but its revolutionary idea survived. The ghost that haunts us is not the clink of missing gold, but the echo of a financial revolution that vanished with its creators, leaving behind only the shadow of its supposed riches and a question that may have been answered all along in the dry parchment of land deeds and loan records. So the idea of a financial ghost is compelling, but it cannot fully explain the grip this order still holds on our imagination. For that, we must look to another secretive society that arose centuries later, one that would claim the Templar mantle as its own spiritual inheritance. The link between the Knights Templar and Freemasonry is one of history's most enduring and controversial connections. When the Masonic fraternity began to formalize in England and Scotland during the 1700s and 1800s, its complex system of initiation rituals and symbolic degrees increasingly looked to the past for a noble pedigree. Among the most powerful of these invented traditions was the story that Freemasonry was the direct, secret successor to the suppressed Knights Templar. According to this foundational myth, after the order's destruction, a core of surviving knights went underground, preserving their esoteric rituals and sacred knowledge. They supposedly disguised themselves within the operative stonemasons' guilds of medieval Europe, hiding their true purpose in plain sight within the symbolism of the builder's craft. The compass, the square, the apron, and the all-seeing eye within this narrative were not just tools of geometry but veiled references to Templar wisdom and their guardianship of ancient secrets. This claimed lineage crystallized in specific high-degree Masonic rites, most notably the rectified Scottish Rite and the Order of the Temple within the York Rite. Here, candidates undergo ceremonies where they are symbolically reinstated as Knights Templar, swearing oaths to protect the weak and defend the Christian faith, echoing the original Templar vows. For the Freemasons who participate, this is not mere play acting. It is a profound symbolic resurrection, a reconnection with a chivalric and spiritual ideal they believe was unjustly destroyed. Historians, looking at the paper trail, find little to no evidence of a direct organizational lineage. The Templars were annihilated as a formal institution, and Freemasonry emerged from the guilds and social clubs of the early modern era. Yet, to dismiss the connection as mere fiction is to miss its immense cultural power. Whether factual or symbolic, this link provided a perfect vessel. It became the vehicle through which the core myths of the Templars, their aura of secrecy, their reputation as guardians of hidden knowledge, and their tragic martyrdom, were preserved, repackaged, and transmitted directly into the modern world. The Masonic lodges became the new preceptories where the legend was kept alive. This had a direct and tangible impact on the treasure hunt itself. Many of the most prominent early seekers, the men who dug at Oak Island or pored over maps of Europe, were Freemasons. They were not simply adventurers, they were, in their own minds, knights on a quest. They believed they were searching for the lost patrimony of their own spiritual forebears. The treasure was no longer just historical loot, it was a sacred trust, a legacy their order was destined to recover. This belief system transformed the hunt from a financial speculation into a sacred mission, fueling centuries of determined, often secretive exploration. The Masonic connection ensured that the Templar mystery never faded into a dry academic footnote. It kept the story alive as a living tradition, a secret history passed from one generation of seekers to the next, forever hinting that the true treasure was not just gold, but a lineage of wisdom waiting to be rediscovered by those worthy of the initiation. The legend of the treasure now lives in the hum of machines and the patient scratch of shovels. Modern seekers have traded medieval maps for ground-penetrating radar, using technology to peer through stone and soil without disturbing a single grain. At Rosslyn Chapel, sensitive scans have probed beneath the famous floor, searching for the rumored crypts and voids that could hold the answer. Similar non-invasive surveys have been conducted at the site of the old Paris temple, the very epicenter of the mystery, hoping to find clues the king's men missed 700 years ago. These tools allow us to ask the earth questions, listening for the echo of hollow spaces or buried metal that might reveal a hidden chapter. Yet, even the most advanced radar cannot distinguish between a natural fissure and a man-made chamber, leaving every anomaly a promise and a frustration. This high-tech hunt is a quiet, meticulous science, a far cry from the pickaxes of old, but it is driven by the same ancient hope. Meanwhile, on Oak Island, the quest has become an industrial operation. For over 2 centuries, syndicates and companies have poured millions into the swampy ground, drilling, digging, and constructing elaborate cofferdams to hold back the relentless sea. Each generation brings new machinery and new investors, lured by the same old story of platforms and parchment. The search has evolved from a backyard dig into a televised engineering spectacle, with crews battling the ingenious flood tunnels in real time. They have found wood dated to centuries before colonization, bits of non-indigenous metal, and those tantalizing shreds of parchment, but the central vault, if it exists, remains protected by its own perfect design. The island itself has become a monument to human tenacity, a physical testament to how powerfully a mystery can compel us to move mountains, or at least to drain a very large and stubborn hole. Across the countryside of Europe, the hunt continues on a more intimate scale. Amateur historians with worn-out library cards walk the fields where Templar commanderies once stood. Metal detectorists sweep over plowed earth, their headphones tuned for the faint buzz that might signal a lost Templar coin or a seal from a broken chest. These enthusiasts are the grassroots keepers of the legend, piecing together local folklore with old property records, hoping to connect a farmer's tale of strange stones to a genuine archaeological site. Every summer, their efforts turn up medieval artifacts, some with the distinctive cross, adding tiny, tangible pieces to the vast, incomplete puzzle. Their work is a reminder that the treasure, in whatever form, is not just a subject for scholars or television producers, but a living part of the landscape, waiting for anyone with curiosity and patience. This enduring fascination has, of course, fueled an entire industry. The mystery drives tourism to villages like Rosslyn and to Rosslyn Chapel, where visitors come not just to see beauty, but to feel the presence of a secret. It spawns endless documentaries, books, and even reality television series, turning historical speculation into mainstream entertainment. In the digital age, the legend has found a new home online, where forums and websites dissect every clue and theory with global collaboration. The treasure itself may be physical, but its true power is now cultural. It is a story that refuses to be buried, proving that the most valuable find is not always gold, but the endless human desire to seek, to question, and to wonder what still lies hidden just beyond the light. Dan Brown's novel did not just become a bestseller, it detonated a cultural bomb. The Da Vinci Code presented a world where the Knights Templar were not merely historical figures, but the armored guardians of a secret so earth-shattering it could topple the foundations of the church. Its pages wove together the mystery of Rosslyn Chapel, the enigmatic carvings of Rosslyn Chapel, and the fabricated history of a secret society called the Priory of Sion into a breathless global chase. For millions of readers and later filmgoers, the line between documented history and compelling fiction became deliciously, permanently blurred. The treasure was no longer a subject for dusty academics or fringe enthusiasts. It was the centerpiece of a blockbuster narrative, sitting in every airport bookstore and playing on every screen. This pop culture phenomenon acted like a powerful magnet, pulling the 700-year-old mystery into the bright light of the 21st century. It created a tidal wave of public interest, but that wave carried both treasure and trash. On one shore, it inspired a genuine resurgence in scholarly and archaeological inquiry. Universities saw increased enrollment in medieval history courses. Grant money flowed for new research into Templar banking records and the archaeology of their European preceptories. Serious historians found themselves with larger, more curious audiences, eager to learn the real story behind the thrilling novel. Yet on the opposite shore, the same wave brought a flood of new, often wildly speculative theories. If Brown's fiction could be so captivating, then perhaps any connection, no matter how tenuous, might hold a kernel of truth. The internet became the perfect ecosystem for these ideas to multiply. Online forums buzzed with theories linking the Templars to everything from the design of the United States dollar bill to the construction of ancient monuments across the globe. The treasure expanded in the public mind from a possible chest of gold to an almost magical key, capable of unlocking secrets about lost civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, or the true nature of reality itself. This mainstreaming had a curious double effect. It ensured the Knights Templar and their lost wealth would never fade into obscurity, cementing their place as permanent fixtures of the modern imagination. Yet it also made the sober, historical search more difficult. The sheer volume of noise, of fantastical claims and convoluted conspiracies, often drowned out the subtle, patient work of uncovering actual evidence. The treasure became a brand, a recognizable symbol of hidden truth in a world saturated with information. You can see its legacy in video games, television series, and countless other novels, where the red cross on a white mantle instantly signals a story of ancient secrets and boundless riches. Dan Brown's fiction, in the end, did not solve the mystery. Instead, it performed a different kind of alchemy. It transformed the Templar treasure from a historical question into a modern myth, a story we collectively tell ourselves about the past's power to hide astonishing things just beneath the surface of the world we think we know. But the most profound treasure might have no weight at all. What if the true legacy of the Knights Templar was not metal or even a sacred object but information? This theory suggests the Knights discovered something during their long guardianship of the Temple Mount, something far more dangerous than gold. It was knowledge, and it threatened the very foundations of the medieval world. This idea transforms the entire mystery from a physical hunt into an intellectual quest for lost history. Imagine the Templars with their unique access to the ancient ruins of Solomon's Temple and their deep connections to the scholarly cultures of both East and West, uncovering texts long buried. These could have been heretical Gnostic Gospels, alternative accounts of early Christianity that presented a view of faith the established church had worked for centuries to suppress. Or perhaps they found advanced architectural and mathematical treatises, scrolls containing the geometric and engineering secrets that would later erupt across Europe in the form of soaring Gothic cathedrals. The sudden, breathtaking rise of Gothic architecture, with its impossible heights and ethereal light, coincided remarkably with the Templars' peak influence. Is it mere coincidence, or could the warrior monks have been the covert conduits for this revolutionary building knowledge, acting as the silent patrons behind the stone? This knowledge would have been a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was power. It could build monuments to heaven. On the other, it was a profound threat. Possessing forbidden texts or heretical ideas would have given their enemies, like King Philip, all the ammunition they needed, painting their secretive nature not as banking discretion, but as diabolical conspiracy. If the treasure was knowledge, then their famous secrecy takes on a new, desperate dimension. You would not hide a library in a chest and bury it, you would encode it. You would scatter its symbols in stone, as some believe they did at Rosslyn. You would entrust its core principles to a hidden network of initiates, passing it down through generations in rituals and symbols, much like the later Freemasons claimed. The evacuation of their wealth then becomes a metaphor for the preservation of this endangered wisdom. The ships leaving La Rochelle might not have carried chests of coin, but chests of vellum and parchment, or a select group of scholar knights tasked with preserving a library. This version of the treasure is ultimately a story about the control of history. Whoever controls the narrative of the past controls the power of the present. The Church of the Middle Ages built its authority on a specific, sanctioned story. A discovery that challenged that story was not just heresy, it was a direct threat to political and social order. So the Templars, as potential custodians of a competing narrative, had to be erased, and their sources of knowledge had to vanish with them. This makes their lost treasure the most compelling kind. It is not something you can own, but something you can understand. It promises not riches, but revelation. The hunt becomes a search for a forgotten book, a faded map, or a cipher in a chapel wall that could rewrite a chapter of human thought. It asks us whether the greatest loss from that Friday the 13th was not a king's ransom in gold, but a library that could have changed the course of knowledge itself. This knowledge would have needed a sanctuary, a place beyond the reach of kings and crusaders. To the south of Templar territory, in the sun-baked hills of Languedoc, another group was facing annihilation for their beliefs. They were the Cathars, and their fate may have intertwined with the Knights in a final, desperate act of guardianship. The Cathars were not soldiers, but peaceful ascetics who preached a form of Christianity the medieval church declared a deadly heresy. They believed in a dualistic world where the material realm was the creation of an evil god, and the spiritual realm was pure and good. This rejection of the material world and the church's authority made them targets. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade, a 20-year war of extermination against the Cathar communities of southern France. It was a brutal conflict, one of the first where Christians slaughtered other Christians on European soil. The Knights Templar, as loyal sons of the Church, officially fought in this crusade. Yet, persistent legends whisper of a different relationship in the shadows. The theory suggests that as the crusade reached its bloody climax, some Templars, perhaps disillusioned by the violence against fellow seekers or bound by secret sympathies, chose a different path. Their network of fortresses and secret routes could have provided the perfect escape system. The focal point of this legend is the mountain fortress of Montségur. Perched on a rocky peak in the Pyrenees, it was the last major stronghold of the Cathar faith. In 1244, after a grueling siege, the defenders surrendered. They were given a 15-day truce before facing the flames. What happened during those 2 weeks has fueled centuries of speculation. Local stories insist that under cover of night, a small group of Cathar perfecti, their spiritual leaders, were lowered down the sheer cliff face. They carried with them the treasure of the Cathars, but what was that treasure for a faith that renounced all material wealth? It could not have been mere gold. The legend claims it was their most sacred objects, perhaps even the Holy Grail itself, which some Cathars reportedly venerated as a sacred stone or emerald cup. This is where the Templar connection crystallizes. Who better to spirit such a priceless, heretical relic to safety than the warrior monks with the continent's best logistics? The Templars had commanderies throughout the region, and their presence at key moments is documented, even if their private intentions are not. The geography makes it plausible. The Languedoc was a landscape dotted with both Cathar castles and Templar preceptories. The timelines are hauntingly close. The fall of Montségur and the destruction of the visible Cathar faith occurred just over 60 years before the Templars themselves were crushed. It creates a narrative arc of two persecuted groups, one annihilated, the other soon to be, with a hidden treasure passing between them in the interim. This fusion of mysteries is incredibly potent. It takes the Templar financial secret and merges it with the Cathar spiritual secret. The lost gold of the Knights becomes the sacred cup of the heretics. The region of Languedoc transforms into a single, vast crypt holding not one, but two buried histories. Every cave in the foothills, every wall of a ruined castle like Montségur or the nearby Templar stronghold at Pérols becomes a potential hiding place for a dual legacy. This theory offers a heartbreakingly beautiful resolution. It suggests that in their final days, the Templars were not just saving their own wealth, but were fulfilling a sacred duty passed to them by another doomed order. The treasure they guarded was no longer their own, but a spiritual trust they vowed to protect, even if it meant burying it so deeply that only the land itself would remember. The medieval vault may have vanished, but the idea of absolute financial secrecy never died. One of the most intriguing modern speculations suggests the Templar treasure did not travel to a physical location, but evolved into an entirely new form. This theory proposes a direct line from the fortified preceptories of the 1300s to the unmarked, granite-faced buildings of modern Switzerland. The Knights were, after all, the inventors of international banking secrecy. A client's deposit in Paris was a matter between him, God, and the order, never disclosed to kings or tax collectors. Their entire power was built on a foundation of unbreakable discretion and ironclad security. So what if, facing annihilation, they did not just hide their gold, but transplanted their entire financial philosophy? The concept is that key members or their intellectual heirs, carrying the core principles of their system, found refuge in the remote, neutral alpine valleys. There, over centuries, the Templar ethos of confidential banking slowly transformed into the legal and cultural framework that would make Switzerland synonymous with secret numbered accounts and impenetrable vaults. The treasure, in this view, was never a static hoard. It was a living system, a protocol for protecting wealth from the grasping hands of power. King Philip sought to seize the container, but the contents, the very concept of secure, anonymous capital, simply flowed into a new, more sophisticated container he could never touch. This connection is historically tenuous, a speculative leap across 6 centuries with little paper trail. Yet, as a what-if, it is profoundly compelling. It transforms the treasure hunt from an archaeological dig into a study of financial history. The legendary chests of gold become a metaphor for capital itself, always seeking the safest, most discreet harbor. The numbered account, protected by Swiss law, is the spiritual descendant of the Templars' coded letter of credit. Both promise the same thing: your wealth is here, it is safe, and no one else has the right to know about it. This theory offers a strange and satisfying kind of closure. It suggests the treasure is not lost. It is all around us, operating in the global financial markets, flowing through wires and resting in secure servers. The Knights' ultimate legacy is the very notion that wealth can exist independently of the state, a concept that has shaped the modern world. Their gold may have been spent, but their secret, the real source of their power, is still very much in business, buried not in stone but in law and tradition. Perhaps the most telling clue lies not in any vault but within ourselves. After 7 centuries, the enduring grip of this mystery reveals a profound psychological truth. We are not just hunting for gold, we are connecting with a story built from our deepest cultural archetypes. At its heart, the Templar legend is a perfect narrative engine. It gives us the fallen noble order, knights of pure purpose corrupted and destroyed by the world. We have the persecuted guardians, martyrs who chose flames over betraying a sacred trust. The greedy, treacherous king represents the corrupting power of unchecked authority. And finally, the unfindable treasure, an object of desire that remains forever just out of reach. This is not mere history, it is a mythic framework that feels instinctively true, echoing tales we have told since the dawn of storytelling. The mystery succeeds because it brilliantly fuses multiple high-stakes genres into one. It is a historical thriller, a financial conspiracy, a religious puzzle, and a grand adventure spanning continents and centuries. There is a role for every kind of seeker. The historian can analyze land deeds, the theologian can ponder relics, the codebreaker can study stone carvings, and the romantic can dream of ghostly fleets sailing into the Atlantic mist. This multifaceted nature means the story never grows stale. It simply shifts focus to meet the curiosities of a new generation. But the legend's greatest strength is its central void, the stunning lack of a definitive answer. That emptiness is a powerful canvas, because no one can prove what happened. Everyone is free to project their own hopes, fears, and theories onto the blank space left by history. For some, it is a financial fantasy, a dream of discovering boundless wealth that transcends a mundane life. For others, it is a spiritual quest, a search for lost wisdom or divine connection in a secular age. The treasure becomes a mirror, reflecting back what we value most: the greedy see gold, the faithful see relics, the curious see forgotten knowledge. This is why the mystery withstands every debunking and historical correction. Facts can challenge a theory, but they cannot erase a feeling. The emotional architecture of the story remains solid, built on timeless themes of betrayal, resilience, and the haunting possibility that the past is hiding something magnificent. In the end, the real treasure unearthed by this 700-year hunt may not be hidden in a pit or a chapel. It is the story itself, endlessly retold, a perpetual machine of wonder that continues to give us the most valuable thing of all: the irresistible thrill of the search and the beautiful, unanswerable question, what if? The search for the Templars is a journey through a landscape thick with legend. Yet to understand the real mystery, we must occasionally clear away the undergrowth of fiction. Many of the most popular stories, while captivating, crumble under the scrutiny of historical evidence. Take the persistent idea that the Templars sailed to the Americas. This theory often points to the carvings in Rosslyn Chapel or the possibility of secret Portuguese voyages. However, scholars have found no credible documentation, no archaeological evidence like a Templar cross or coin in a pre-Columbian layer to support this claim. The chapel carvings, while fascinating anachronisms, are more likely symbolic or based on other Old World plants. The idea is a beautiful what-if, but it belongs to the realm of romantic speculation, not established history. It shows how the vacuum of their disappearance pulls other grand mysteries into its orbit. Another cornerstone of the myth comes from the trial records themselves, the sinister idol known as Baphomet. Under brutal torture, some knights confessed to worshipping a carved head or a mysterious figure with this name. For centuries, this confession fueled tales of devil worship and occult rites. Modern historians, however, see this very differently. The name Baphomet is likely a medieval corruption of Muhammad, a common tactic to link the knights to the Islamic faith they fought, thereby doubly condemning them as heretics. The descriptions of the idol varied wildly between confessions, a classic sign of coerced fabrication. The terrifying, goat-headed image we associate with Baphomet today was actually invented in the 19th century by occultist Eliphas Levi. The trial testimony was not a revelation of secret practice but a tool of political destruction, a script written by the order's enemies and forced upon its members. This clarification does not make the Templars less interesting, it makes their fate more tragic. They were murdered over a fiction. Perhaps the most successful modern fabrication is the Priory of Sion. In the 1950s and 60s, a Frenchman named Pierre Plantard created a series of elaborate forged documents. These papers claim the Priory was a centuries-old secret society, founded in the Crusades, dedicated to protecting the Merovingian bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and that its past Grand Masters included luminaries like Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton. Plantard later admitted to the hoax in court, yet the idea was so powerfully woven into the tapestry of Rennes-le-Château and popularized by later books that it took on a life of its own. The Priory of Sion is a perfect example of a modern myth grafted onto an ancient mystery, creating a compelling but entirely false lineage. It demonstrates how our desire for a continuous, hidden history can sometimes override the facts. Acknowledging these inventions is not about dismissing the mystery. It is about refining the search. By separating the later stories from the contemporary records, we get a clearer picture of what we are actually looking for. The genuine puzzle remains immense and compelling. We know a vast financial network was dismantled. We know their vaults were found unexpectedly empty. We know they were destroyed by a king desperate for their wealth. These facts alone are the solid ground from which all legitimate speculation must launch. The later myths, from Baphomet to transatlantic voyages, are like layers of sediment deposited over the bedrock by centuries of imagination. They tell us more about the eras that invented them than about the Templars themselves. This process of sifting fact from fiction does not diminish the treasure hunt. It sharpens it. It asks us to listen more carefully to the whispers from the 13th century and to be a little more skeptical of the shouts that came centuries later. The truth, when we finally piece it together, will likely be stranger and more human than any myth. The clues are scattered like fragments of a broken map, each piece pointing to a different corner of the world. To follow the treasure is to trace the ghostly outline of the Templar network itself, a web that stretched from holy sites to remote islands. Let us start at the very beginning in Jerusalem. The Temple Mount is not just their namesake, it is the original source of the legend. Here, they guarded the ruins of Solomon's temple for nearly a century, And here, the most enduring theories suggest they made a foundational discovery, whether spiritual or financial, that defined their entire purpose. The treasure hunt, in a sense, begins in this sacred dust. From that epicenter, the trail leads directly to Paris. The mighty Templar fortress there was the beating heart of their financial empire, the central bank of medieval Europe. Its shockingly empty vaults on that October morning in 1307 are the concrete proof that something massive was moved. Paris is the crime scene, the void from which all speculation flows. The logical escape routes from that void point west to the Atlantic coast. The port of La Rochelle represents the launch point of the fleet legend, the last known departure for whatever was smuggled away from the king's grasp. It is the gateway to the ocean and to all the transatlantic theories that would follow. North from France, the trail leads to the Scottish lowlands and the enigmatic Rosslyn Chapel. This stone puzzle box, with its pre-Columbian plants and architectural codes, stands as the most famous alleged reliquary. It represents the theory of sanctuary and symbolic burial, a treasure encoded not in ledgers but in sandstone and shadow. Across that same ocean, Oak Island waits. The brutal, flooded engineering of the money pit is the polar opposite of Rosslyn's artistry. It represents the theory of raw, physical concealment, a vault built not with symbolism but with traps, suggesting a treasure so valuable it required a fortress in the earth to protect it. Back in Europe, nestled in the French Pyrenees, the village of Rennes-le-Château offers a modern mystery. It is not a medieval hiding place but a 19th century trigger. The story of Bérenger Saunière and his unexplained wealth shows how the Templar legend can erupt centuries later, pulling biblical conspiracies and shadowy payoffs into its orbit, proving the mystery's power to reinvent itself for new eras. And we cannot forget the silent sentinels scattered across the continent. The rugged Templar castles of Portugal, like Toma, speak of official survival and redirected wealth into the age of discovery. The lonely preceptories in the English countryside and the remote commanderies in the Languedoc Hills are the forgotten nodes of the network, each one a potential way station where chests might have been stored or knowledge passed on during a desperate flight. This global map makes one thing stunningly clear. The hunt is not confined to a single country or even a single continent. It stretches from the ancient sands of the Middle East to the foggy shores of Nova Scotia, from the sun-drenched hills of Portugal to the rain-swept glens of Scotland. Every location is a chapter in the same unfinished book, a different answer to the same haunting question. The geography of the search perfectly mirrors the geography of the Order's power, proving that their true legacy, lost or otherwise, was never meant to be small. It was built to span the known world, and so it seems is the mystery they left behind. But if a shovel finally struck wood and iron tomorrow, the discovery would ignite a very modern storm. The ancient question of where is suddenly replaced by a far more complicated one. Who, legal ownership of a hypothetical Templar treasure is a labyrinth with many exits, each leading to a different claimant. The first and most instinctive answer is the finder. In many countries, common law traditions like treasure trove or modern statutes reward discoverers, especially on private land. A farmer ploughing his field in Scotland or a construction crew in France might have a strong legal and moral case. They took the risk, they did the work, the treasure is on their property. But this is no ordinary cache of Roman coins. The scale, historical significance, and international nature of the Templar legacy would instantly shatter any simple finders-keepers scenario. The government of the nation where it is found would almost certainly intervene. Under cultural patrimony laws, many European countries claim ownership of historically significant artifacts found within their borders. France, Italy, Portugal, or the United Kingdom could argue the treasure is an integral part of their national heritage, a piece of their medieval history too important to be privately owned. They would move to seize it for a state museum, perhaps offering a reward but certainly taking control. this is where the claims become truly Byzantine. Could the modern French state, as the successor to the kingdom of Philip IV, even make a claim? It would be a stunning historical irony. The descendant institution of the very power that stole the order's property, now claiming the property it failed to steal. The legal argument would be tenuous but politically potent. Then there is the Vatican. As the spiritual authority that created the Templars, granted their rule, and received their loyalty, the Catholic Church could mount a profound moral claim. It could argue that the wealth was accumulated in the name of the Church for the defense of Christendom, and that its seizure by a secular king was an illegal act. The treasure, in this view, belongs to the spiritual institution it was originally intended to serve, not to any king or modern nation, but what of the order's own descendants? The Knights Templar were a celibate order, so there is no direct bloodline. However, several modern organizations claim spiritual descent. The Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem or other chivalric orders might step forward. Their claim would be symbolic rather than legal, but in the court of public opinion, it could carry significant weight. They would argue they are the rightful heirs to the legacy, if not the ledger books. And we cannot forget the potential claims of those who held assets in trust. If the treasure includes the crowns, jewels, and documents of 13th century nobles deposited for safekeeping, then the descendants of those medieval families could launch lawsuits. Imagine a duke or a count producing 800-year-old paperwork to claim a piece of the hoard. The legal battles would span generations and jurisdictions. Real-world precedents are both a guide and a warning. The discovery of the Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de Atocha led to decades of litigation between treasure salvers and the governments of the United States and Spain, ultimately decided by courts weighing historical sovereignty. The ongoing disputes over artifacts like the Elgin marbles or the Benin bronzes show how fiercely nations fight for cultural property. A Templar find would dwarf these cases in complexity, pitting modern nations against the Church, against private individuals, and against the ghost of a king whose actions started it all. This legal quagmire adds a final, ironic twist to the hunt. The very act of finding the treasure might ensure it is never truly possessed by anyone. It could spend the next century in a secure vault, locked not by seawater or stone, but by lawsuits and diplomatic notes, becoming a modern legend of its own while lawyers argue over the ghost of a debt from the year 1307. 7 centuries have passed since the last Templar ship slipped into the fog, yet the hunt feels as alive as ever. We began with a band of 9 knights taking a sacred vow on the Temple Mount, their simple mission to protect pilgrims spiraling into the creation of a financial empire that rivaled kingdoms. We witnessed their shocking downfall on a Friday the 13th, a betrayal born of royal greed that left vaults mysteriously empty. From that void, we followed the echoes of their legend across continents, from the stone-coated chapel in Scotland to the flooded pit on Oak Island, from the quiet hills of Rennes-le-Château to the grand voyages of the Age of Discovery. We sifted through whispers of sacred relics and forbidden knowledge, separating haunting truths from elaborate fictions. The treasure we discovered is not one thing. It is a mirror. For some, it reflects the glint of lost gold, a king's ransom waiting in a forgotten crypt. For others, it shows the sacred outline of a relic, a tangible piece of the divine. It can be the cool weight of ancient knowledge, scrolls containing history's lost chapters, or the brilliant blueprint of a financial system that built the modern world. And for many of us, the most enduring treasure is simply the story itself, a perfect tapestry woven from threads of faith, power, betrayal, and resilience. This is the magic of a great historical mystery. It lives in the gap between what we know and what we feel must be true. History's silence is not an end but an invitation. Our minds abhor a vacuum, and so we fill the empty spaces with our dreams, our logic, and our deepest curiosities. The Templars left us with a monumental question mark, and for 700 years we have been writing our own answers in the margins of their story. This journey does not have to end here. The landscape of the mystery is real and waiting. You can stand in the shadow of Rosslyn Chapel and trace the stone vines with your own eyes. You can walk the ramparts of a Templar castle in Portugal or gaze out from the ruins of Montsegur. You can become part of the next chapter. What do you believe happened? Is the treasure physical, spiritual, or something else entirely? Share your theory in the comments below, and let's keep this ancient conversation alive. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest enigma, be sure to subscribe. We have countless more journeys into the past planned, each one a puzzle waiting for us to solve it together.